One thing that I've heard you say today a couple of times, and I've been picking up on it, is how you're reframing questions in your mind on, you know, don't look at it like this, look at it as challenging. And I love like psychology and neuroscience. I'm interested in it, but I have no expertise whatsoever. I've just read a couple of books that I really, really liked. There was one
Yeah.
called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel.
Yeah.
That book was incredible.
Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah, exactly. Totally gave me a new perspective on like how we work as people. But but the way you look at things is very, because you have a neuroscience background, and I'm sure it's played a big role in, you know, in your sales career. You said that emotions drive 90% of our decision making. So, but a lot of times we're still trying to sell people with logic. And I know with your company that you guys use scientific methods to help people in their sales processes and to improve their sales. So how do you translate the emotion using a scientific method? Because scientific methods are quite processed and quite logical. So how do you translate that into creating the emotional change that you're trying to?
Okay, yeah, that's a big question. Firstly, we have to realize that emotions, people say that perception is reality. It's not true. Emotion is reality, right? You know, we have 7 billion people on the planet. There are 7 billion different realities, not just one, right? Or not just a few. Emotions are so much of how we view ourselves and others and the world that we live in and our place in that world, that if you deal with the emotions first, you're going to more likely create a platform to be able to act in a certain way. Let me give you an idea of that. In neuroscience, there are 5 steps in the sensory to behavior process, right? You've got the sensory area, so, you know, touch, hot, cold, light, what we see, what we smell, what we taste. That's the sensory, right? The second area is perception. How do we perceive what we're sensing, right? And experience and memory has a very big part to play in that. But how we perceive something will determine the third part, which is the emotion or the feeling behind that, right? And for those listening, you might think, well, hang on a second, perception comes before emotion, so surely perception will tell what reality is. I'll come on to that in a second, right? So emotion is everything, right? The emotion is the third one, sorry. Then you get thought. So after I've sensed something, I have a perception about it, I've created an emotional connection to it, right? Which is critical to the memory and neural process, right? Because nothing goes through without the emotion, right? Then I create a thought about it. Once I've created a thought about it, then I take a behavior or an action. So it's very important to know that ROI and value demonstration is important. You must have it, right? It's table stakes. So for anyone that plays poker or has played poker, table stakes is just, you have to have it to just have a seat at the table, right? Value demonstration and business value, you must have it to have a seat at the table. But it's the emotion that's going to change things, right? And it's understanding and changing that emotion. Now, to talk about perception and emotion here, right? Because people say that perception came first. Recessions are not great, right? But there are so many stories of people who are exactly the same situation in a recession, but one thrives and the other one doesn't, right? So many people that have had personal tragedies, right? There are so many stories about that, right? People that have come from very, very tough circumstances. Why is it that those people that come from those tough circumstances, some of them, rise to the top and become the best version of themselves and do some incredible things for their community themselves, the world? And there are those that come from an abundant background, right? Privileged background. They had everything, and yet they turn to drugs, alcoholism, so many different things. The way that you view a perception, the emotion that you create from that perception will determine your thought. You can have a bad situation happen and you perceive it as bad, but the emotion you now attach to that is that you say, this is potentially a good thing for him. I had someone that we used to work with who, at the age of 20, I think it was 26, he's had a football accident and suddenly became paralyzed from the neck down. 26 years old. Most of us would look at that and say, well, life is over. 18 months later, this person is starting to take his first steps.
Wow.
Right? Assisted, but starting to take his first steps. Right? He created a great emotion from a perceptually bad situation, disastrous situation. Right? You can have something that you perceive. No one in this world, when they hear that paralyzed from neck down, no one will perceive that as a good thing. No one, right? It's perceived as bad because you've now lost pretty much most of your functional process, right? But the emotion you attach to that, right? It wasn't that he wasn't upset, yes, he cried, but he then said, I'm going to have a different emotion from this now. I'm going to make this into something else. I'm going to create something more. This is going to test me, right? So emotion is really important to the process. Now, why did I go through all of that? Because you've got to know what emotions your buyers are going through right now, right? Or anyone that you're selling to. By the way, everything I'm talking about here isn't just about the sales process. If you're looking for a promotion, you've got to know and do your research about the manager you're speaking to, what's going to motivate him or her to help you get promoted, right? It's an evergreen thing, right? It's persuasion. But your buyers right now, what emotions are they going through? They're freaking out. I train quite a lot of salespeople. The people that I train, right? I'm hearing stories where they're saying, hey, we were so close to a sale, but then this person got laid off or got furloughed all of a sudden. Buyers are going through a situation right now where they are having their budgets slashed, right? Most of them, right, are having their budgets cut. And the headcount is being cut. They're being asked to do the same, if not more, with less people. So they're having to take on a lot more responsibility, a lot more work, a lot more time, which means time away from their family, all those things they're going through right now. On top of that, they don't know if they're going to still have a job in 1 week's time.
True.
Most salespeople don't even bother to just think about that, like to really appreciate that. So those are the decisions that are being made, right? Sorry, the emotions that are being felt. And then the second one is the emotion, which is the 6 human needs. They create an emotional satisfaction. So on my website, I said 90% of the decisions being made are based on emotion. It's not that they're both just an emotional reaction, right? Which is absolutely true. It's also based on satisfying an emotional need. Even someone who is logical or tries to be fully logical, like a robot, like Spock from Star Trek, right? Believe it or not, even that person is satisfying an emotional need. The emotional desire to feel like they're logical, which is really contradictory, right? It's completely ironic how that's the case. But that's true, because within their circle and how they're perceived, their significance, they're perceived as logical, right? Somewhere down the line, being illogical equaled pain. Somewhere in their past, something like that happened. Being illogical equaled pain. So they are staying logical, or what they perceive to be as logical as possible, to avoid the pain. Doesn't mean that you're going to cause a painful situation to them. It's just that they've associated that past experience so that any future circumstances where they're illogical or emotional will mean painful. Right? Some people, even down to how they deal with their children, which is big, right? They won't show emotions to their children because they feel that doing so will equal some form of pain, even though that may not be the case. So be clear and be appreciative of the emotions that your buyers are going through right now, right? The other part is the mindset, right? Your own mindset. So you probably saw this on my website. Your own mindset has a very big impact on how you conduct your sales activities, right? You're going to be going through a lot of peaks and troughs. So get to understand your emotion as well. What's in it for you? Why is it important for you to make those calls every day? So once you understand what they're facing, and once you understand what they're feeling and how they view their world, you're now in a position to then be able to use that in an ethical way to show them that what you have is aligned to satisfying that emotion that they have. I'll give you two examples. You might sell to a chief medical officer or chief marketing officer, whoever it is, chief medical officer of a company. One person is very risk averse. They're trying to create certainty. Another person is very ambitious and they like to take risks, certain risks, calculated risks. They like new things, provided that they want. Those are two very different emotional satisfactions. That means I need to figure out which one of the two they fit into and use the language and the benefit statements that align to each one. If I'm talking about the latest innovative products and technologies that we're doing, that's going to set them up for the future and things like that. To the person that's all about certainty, I've lost that person. Likewise, if I talk about certainty to the person, and this person, she's really ambitious, she's like, I don't want that, right? So align to the emotional values of that person and what's important for them, right? Use emotional benefits and statements, right? You will find that if you do that, then that person is more likely going to champion your solution compared to if you just have business value, right? You've got to have both. Hopefully that's answered your question.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. You've been answering the questions so well. Don't worry, they've been awesome. And I speak about things in such it's such a different perspective than what I've had. So I'm learning so much from this conversation. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad.